Once you're a member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar, you can sponsor the admission of other attorneys. Sitting there in the United States Supreme Court, there was just a chill that came over me. I am in the highest court in the land. They've referred to me as judge. You step up and you say your name and who you're sponsoring the admissions for. I am naming the folks that I'm sponsoring their admission, and I made eye contact with Justice Brown Jackson, and she smiled at me. And I was even telling that story, I still have chills. It was the wildest experience standing there as a judge myself in that moment in the U.S. Supreme Court. It certainly hit different. Sentimental.
What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Unscripted Order Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, B. Smalls.
Yes, indeed. And I'm your other co-host, D. Bugg. Thank you folks again for tuning in with us.
So, look, we appreciate y'all coming back to rock with us yet again. Episode 17 has gotten a lot of attention. Y'all seem to resonate with Judge Lee. So with that being said, we just appreciate y'all support. So if you wouldn't mind, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can like us on or follow us on Instagram. And then also you can find the podcast, stream it on Spotify and also Apple Podcasts as well.
As always, we're everywhere in these podcasts and social media streets. And because this is a law-related podcast and we talk about legal issues, we have to give you the disclaimer, no small print. Nothing that we say in this podcast is intended to create any type of attorney-client privilege or provide any type of legal advice. If you do have a legal question, we strongly suggest that you reach out to an attorney that practices that type of law in your area and ask your question. Everything here in this podcast is presented for informational, entertainment purposes only. Nothing more.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
So, Bug, I'm excited about this episode. It's interesting how, I think people sometimes will ask us, well, how do y'all come up with, what y'all going to talk about, And I'm going to be honest with you. The topic today, honestly, so I'm walking down the hallway, headed back to my chambers, and I walk by the break room where the clerks will sometimes, it's particularly lunchtime, will hang out at during their lunch breaks. And I walk by, and one of our clerks, shout out to Miss Sandy. Sandy is from Puerto Rico. She's Boricua. She and so she's got Spanish accent, and so she said, as I'm walking by, she says, "Hey, Judge." And I was like, "Hey, Sandy." And it's one of those things where at this point, 5 years in, you kind of gotten used to it. But as I walk by and I hear her say, "Hey, Judge," it got me to thinking about how often, as judges, people, we hear that title and, not to say that it means any less. It still, blows my mind when people say, "Hey, Judge."
Yeah.
But for some reason, I think it hit a little bit different. I think part of it, and we'll talk about it in this episode, had to do with what we talked about last time with Judge Lee. And so we'll dive into that. But, it really got me to thinking, like, you know what? Sometimes, that title, that "Hey, Judge," hearing that, it's a little different sometimes. And so today we going to talk about the topic, "Hey, Judge," and just kind of what that means to each of us. Because I know that you've got some thoughts on the topic. So let's without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive right in and let's talk about it. So, Bug, have there ever been times or there's are there any specific moments that you can think about where that title judge was said, not in the courtroom, maybe it was the hallways, walking to your chambers, or maybe it was in the grocery store. Can you think of a time when, or times when, maybe it hit you a little bit different and you felt, some kind of way like, oh man, it's like, this is crazy.
Definitely. There's been quite a few. I think we've talked about some of them before in public. There's been a time when there was a sheriff's deputy who had a kid that went to my son's school, and I'm, picking up my kid from the after school program, and I hear from across the parking lot, "Hey, Judge," and in public and outside of the courthouse, you don't, if you haven't adopted that as your persona, it still can kind of shock you. Like, well, I know they're talking about me, but this is not the setting or place for that. So who is that that's not even, calling me by my name? I've certainly had it in different settings where you're like, or somebody may recognize you from court, in the grocery store. I think we talked about,
Yeah.
which is an interesting one. But there was another time that, it should have, it was fitting, but I always think of it, and your bobblehead in the back, our matching gifts from Judge Lee. First of all, thank you, Judge Lee, for your time and your
Yes,
kind,
absolutely.
generous gift. The gift of the two Supreme Court bobbleheads, but one is Justice Brown Jackson. And I was at the U.S. Supreme Court. I became a member of the U.S. Supreme Court some years ago. I'd have to go back and look
Okay.
at the certificate when it was. But once you're a member of the U.S. Supreme Court bar, you can sponsor the admission of other attorneys. So I was doing that on behalf of a group of attorneys from the Alexandria Bar Association. I was introduced as Judge Dante Bugg from Fairfax County Circuit Court. And, sitting there in the United States Supreme Court, there was just a chill that came over me. Like, man, I am in the highest court in the land.
Yeah.
They've referred to me as judge. And, you
Wow.
step up and you say your name and who you're sponsoring the admissions for. And I was recently telling this story because when I opened the bobblehead and Justice Brown Jackson had come up for another reason as well. And I think I mentioned it to you, I am naming the folks that are being admitted, that I'm sponsoring their admission. And I made eye contact with Justice Brown Jackson, and she smiled at me. And I was even telling that story, I still have chills. It and it was the wildest experience. And standing there as a judge myself, in that moment in the U.S. Supreme Court, it certainly hit different. And it's one of those things where it's never lost on me, where sometimes it may feel out of place. Sometimes there is a preference where it's like, I just wish you would call me by my name, you
Yeah.
know, if we're not in the formal setting or work related. But, it always, I think for me, always reminds me of the stature of the position. I think people do it mostly out of respect or habit, because it took a while. It took a long while before I would ever call Judge Lee anything other than Judge Lee in a conversation. And I promise you,
Yeah.
for years,
Yeah.
he would say, "Call me Gerald," and I'm like, "Okay, thank you, Judge Lee." Like, it just is, especially if you're an attorney practicing a trial attorney. I think we are so used to always communicating and approaching the court with that level of respect. It's either judge or your honor. I've seen times when someone says sir or ma'am to a judge, and it's like you can hear, tires screech. Like, hold on a second,
Yeah.
you didn't use the proper terminology. So there are definitely times when it hits differently, or the times when you don't hear it, and you're like, well, maybe it should be used in this setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, we've talked about this. Yeah, told the Walmart story, running into somebody from court. One time I went to Chicken Salad Chick. First of all, you been to Chicken Salad Chick before? Have we talked about Chicken Salad Chick?
You've mentioned it
Okay.
before, and I've heard, we had a participant in one of our treatment dockets that worked there at some point. So
Okay.
I know they're down. I don't know that we have them up here. Oh, yeah, we do, because she worked at one. What am I talking about?
Okay.
I haven't been.
Okay.
Short answer, I haven't been
Okay.
yet.
Well, it's great. Phenomenal. You should
It
check it
sounds like
out.
something I would be interested in, chicken and salads.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's good. But anyways, I mean, Chicken Salad Chick. Actually, it's kind of bad. I go there on a fairly regular basis because it's literally like 2 minutes from the courthouse. So, on those days when, like today, I got caught up in my docket. I had another docket that was coming up, and I needed something quick. So I pulled out my cell phone and did the order right in the app,
Yeah.
and you get there and I walk in there. I was like, hey, how you doing? You're Brian, right?
Yeah.
Well, it just so happened I was in there one day, and there was a friend of mine who was in there, and he was with a colleague. And, of course, he's like, hey, I want to introduce you to Judge Smalls. It was just the way he said it. You
Yeah.
know, people start turning around like, Judge?
Yeah. Who's that? He doesn't look like a judge.
Right.
We'll
But,
talk about that too.
yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's just one of those things where, again, yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's out of, I think, reverence, not necessarily for me as an individual, but more, I think, more so of the position. And so I think that's a great segue. And I think, when in the last episode with Judge Lee, and there was a clip that we, put out on social media that I think kind of resonated with people. Judge Lee, is telling the story, and he, talks about how he recognized that he was a judge and he was not the judge. And so talk about, I guess, because when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's, that really said something to me. So for those folks who maybe aren't judges, talk about when you heard him say that. Like, what did that mean to you? What were you picking up from what he was saying there?
I think it just kind of hammered home that point of keeping the proper perspective. From Judge Lee and other judges, when I first took this position, I got the advice of reminding yourself that you have an important job, but that does not mean that you are an important person, right?
Mm,
Remaining humble and not letting the job or the robe go to your head. When you get to that thought that I am the judge and everything I say goes, and I don't have to be open to feedback, criticism, other points of view, I'm the judge and what I say goes. I think that can be a slippery slope, and to hear him say that in the way he phrased it, especially in the context that he was talking about, I think is one of those reminders that we have to be mindful of that. We, especially in, in the circuit court, I think I said it in court today. I know I actually said it to my law clerk because, we're discussing something. You try to make the right decision, just like Judge Lee said. And the way our system is set up, the Court of Appeals, the right of direct appeal to the Court of Appeals has been expanded. So the appellate courts have no problem telling us when we are incorrect. you know, so we get a reminder, a public reminder of, if you do commit error in a case or you abuse your discretion or rule the wrong way. So just being mindful of the fact that even as a judge, you're not the final say in terms of judges. I am not a Supreme Court justice or Court of Appeals judge. There are judges that actually make the law, and I am interpreting the law and applying it to the case, and really only for the case that is before me.
sure.
And after that, there's no extension past that. Sometimes I think there can be this desire of trial court judges to perhaps set the law. And I don't necessarily know that I know we can't do that. But that concept of, or that thought of, I am the judge, I'm the end all be all, that really, obviously coming from Judge Lee, hits home. And is a reminder of the way that we should be approaching the work that we do. And I think it requires that on a regular basis to remind yourself of that. It's easy to kind of get caught up in the back and forth, stress, especially when the job gets stressful. When you have back to back long dockets and those days, like we talked about on some of those episodes when people are just people coming into court, whether litigants, attorneys, or anything in between, are just not, they don't care that you're wearing a robe, right? And they are testing your patience, they're testing your judicial temperament. And you can hit a streak where you have days upon days or weeks upon weeks of that. And it's, I think a easy thing to kind of fall into a doggone it. At the end of the day, I'm the judge because I said so,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
when you start sounding like the angry parent and there's no basis behind it, you got to be able to check yourself on that.
yeah. It reminds me of a clip I saw on social media recently. I don't know where this judge was at, but it was interesting because the judge made a ruling, and the lawyer kind of like, like kind of called her out on it, and the response kind of was like, well, it's because I said so. It was almost like a parent, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and as I was listening to Judge Lee, and when we recorded with him, he talked about being a judge and not the judge. I think that it is absolutely something that if you have the wrong mindset and the wrong mentality, can be very, very dangerous approach to the job if you approach it like, I am the judge in this court. No, you are a judge. There was a judge before you. There will be a judge after you. And if you take the approach, or you have the mindset that, you are the end all be all, well,
Yeah.
like you said, it's one of those things where you, you can get those reminders that, you are, your stuff stinks just like everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that you're the way you termed it, like you have a special job, but we aren't necessarily special people that have special privileges, and that it's just one of those things where you have to just be mindful that when you are interacting with folks, whether it be in court or even outside of court, that you don't allow the title of the position to put you in a headspace that you are above, or superior, if you will, to any other individuals. Because in reality, we're not. We're not.
I agree.
We're not. And I think it's one of the reasons why, when we started this podcast, it was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, was to show and demonstrate that, hey, we're normal, regular people.
With an affinity for hip hop music.
Amongst other things.
Amongst other things.
Amongst
Sports,
other things.
all kinds of things.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But, we've been in, this law thing now for, as we were talking about recently, 20 plus years now at this point in time. And it's crazy to think about that. But I imagine that, you probably have some stories, or can think of some times where you saw the judge that had, as they call it, the black robe disease. So, you don't have to give specifics, call anybody out, but, talk about some of those instances in which, it became very apparent that, this judge might not be in the right place from a mentality standpoint.
Yeah. Again, not naming names. Some people are no longer on the bench. They may still be on the bench. I don't really know. These are the names have been changed to protect the judicially innocent. But just observations, I think, of when people may question or challenge your authority, right? I'll start by, well, I'll say one of the things I have developed is to try my best to not get into arguments back and forth. So sometimes I will just remove myself and just take a recess, especially if, it's getting testy. And a lot of times it is when the litigants or the attorneys are getting back and forth. And rather than have to raise my voice to take control of things, like I'll just tell them we're going to take a recess and let everybody kind of govern themselves to kind of calm down. Some of those experiences of, being in court, and a person may, I'll say I think it was term day in an unnamed jurisdiction.
Okay.
And the prosecutor and the judge are having this back and forth over when a case can be set and whether or not it needs to be out to a certain amount of time because the Commonwealth needed more time to prep. Now, I'll say I might have been the attorney on this case. I was fine with any of those dates, so it's not my argument, right? My client is not incarcerated.
Right.
We're not really in a rush. But
Sure.
the judge, for whatever reason, felt like this needed to be set on a specific day. And that judge, once the, prosecutor's listing the reasons of why, and, in hindsight, seems like it was a straightforward, legitimate argument, just lost all temper on the bench. And it starts like a back and forth shouting, not even back and forth shouting. The judge is doing the shouting. The prosecutor is kind of almost stunned, but still standing firm on position. And it was something to the effect of, I heard you the first time. If you say it again, we're going to have a problem. And the prosecutor said it again. And it was phrased in, Your Honor, I understand. I just want to make sure the record's clear. This is our position. Me in the hallway. And forcefully tells the prosecutor to come back. Every
Yeah.
courtroom has a hallway where you enter from. It was the only time I'd ever seen the prosecutor go behind the judge into the hallway to chambers or wherever they come from. And it wasn't, I don't think they stepped with 3 feet away from that door. Everyone in the courtroom can hear this judge going off on this prosecutor. I mean, we are sitting there in the courtroom just like shocked, quite frankly. I mean, the deputies, no one's really saying anything. I think most people are trying to hear, right? But it's not, I mean, the judge is just going off. And then, of course, the door opens, the prosecutor comes out first to a room full of oohs and ahs, and then the judge eventually comes back on. And it's like, I think even in that moment, and I look at it now differently, obviously, having had the experience of serving as a judge. I think there's a way to maintain control of your courtroom, but not having to go that far,
Sure.
right? You don't,
Sure.
you have a deputy there. You don't have to go that far, or you need to be able to kind of catch yourself. Just knowing it's been an issue with that particular judicial figure. And I think the other way that I've seen it show up sometimes is in the interaction with judges off the bench. You have the experience of doing CLEs or going to conferences, even, social things like bar association dances, dinners, things to that effect. And you just can kind of tell the folks that that's all they can talk about is cases. They are not engaged in a conversation unless they are talking about a case. And a lot of times what they're talking about are the cases where someone tested their authority. I had this person in court and they tried to do this, and this, and I told them this, and okay, well, okay, that's one story. And then the next story is and this time, and anytime someone else brings up something else, there seems to always be a story about that person flexing their authority. And I just don't, who am I to tell anybody else how to do the job, right? As I am, but I don't know that that's the right mindset for what we're supposed to be doing in the job, what the role of a judge is supposed to be. But it's an easy thing that can happen. I can't recall who gave me the advice before I started, but someone told me that if you are not really secure in who you are, the job can quickly go to your head, because very quickly there's this level of respect. Like I said about Judge Lee in the last episode, there's that glow that you become your honor. You walk into a room and people stop talking a lot of times. I think I mentioned on here, when I first started, I went down to the records division. There was a lady in the clerk's office that when I would come into the level, she would stand up and bow. And I'm sure it was out of respect. I think it had to do with, not really being used, and this was pre-COVID, but not really being used to seeing the judges circulate through the clerk's office.
Sure.
And, before we went electronic and digital with so many things, just because of, my learning style, I need to get up and walk every now and again. So it didn't bother me to take an order down to the third floor to the clerk's office and just kind of walk through the hallways. But yeah, every time she would, and I had to, politely ask her or let her know you don't understand what you're doing that out of respect, but you don't have to do that. But if you're not secure in yourself, then you start to believe, okay, well, if people bow to me at work, then they should bow to me when at home, and they should, listen to me at home or when I'm at the gym or when I'm doing anything. If I go to McDonald's or Wendy's, if I don't get the proper service, do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? And the answer usually is no, I don't. I don't know who you are. And let's move it along. Yeah.
as you're telling that story, the first thing that popped in my mind was like, oh my goodness, it is you. It is you. Oh, I will cherish this day for the rest of my life.
My favorite part of that scene. He says, "Who is that?" Oh, just a man I met in the bathroom.
Yeah, the cultural references on the Unscripted
Yeah,
Order
yeah.
podcast. If you know, you know.
It's not too long before we got to get back to Coming to America.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but to just piggyback off of that, I think we've all experienced that as attorneys. That judge that was maybe a little short tempered, or thought because they were wearing the robe or they were in that position that, hey, you needed to treat them with a level of respect, dignity, and yes, that may be the case, but there's judges that I can think of that they absolutely allowed the position to go to their head, and they expected people to treat them a certain way. And I've and you talk to other people who aren't judges, and they tell you their experiences in dealing with
Yeah.
judges.
Oh yeah.
And that is always, because one of the things that gets talked about, I don't think enough, is procedural justice. There was a book written, Power of Dignity, that was written by Judge Pratt up in New Jersey, and in the book she talks about procedural justice, and procedural justice is people coming to court, getting to make their case, have the judge treating them with respect and dignity, and they have their day in court, and they feel like they've had their day in court. And that is a big part of our process and credibility with the public, is for folks to again, they might not necessarily agree with the ultimate outcome. Maybe they do. Maybe the case went in their favor. But whatever the case, it should never be a situation where folks come to court and feel disrespected by the person up there wearing the robe, because of the tone and tenor and how they now the flip side of that is you also, as a litigant, have to comport yourself a certain
Yeah.
way as well. And have there been times when I felt like okay, I could have handled that a little bit differently?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, because look,
Oh yeah.
we're human beings. We're
Yeah.
human
Definitely.
beings.
Definitely. Yeah. I've had times where I've after court asked by court clerk or deputy, like how did because we can't really tell how we come off sometimes,
Sure.
and there are certainly times where you might be frustrated or something's tedious and you're trying to communicate in the proper way, but you still want to have that check of like, hey, did it seem like I was, I didn't cross a line, or, I didn't show a level of frustration. And, you just want to have that check of how other people are perceiving you, acknowledging that, it's not going to be, you're not going to bat 1,000 sometimes.
Yeah, but the other side of that is, and this kind of goes along with this conversation. You can ask the deputy or the clerk, like,
Sure.
you know, did I go over? No, no, judge, of course not. You were just fine.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
That's true.
it's one of those things where more often than not, unless it is a colleague, or somebody that you have a different type of relationship with than, coworker or colleague or something like that, you might not get, the answer that you really should get.
Yeah.
But I mean, but you can at least ask the question, and I
Mhm.
hope at this point in time that the folks that I work with would be honest with me and say, well, Judge, you could have said this or could have done that. But I will say this, me. We have similar temperaments. We do. I'm laid back. I'm easygoing. You know, I'm going to try to de-escalate. I'm going to try to diffuse. But if you push the right button, okay, if you push the right button, okay, it's still not going to be a situation where I'm, taking anybody out in the hallway, okay,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
even in that situation where the judge, took the prosecutor in the hallway and read them the riot act or did whatever they did, in that situation, for me personally, there have been times when things have happened in court that need to be addressed. And so oftentimes I won't address it right there in that moment. What I will do is I will let that moment pass. If I need to, speak to an attorney or someone else who was involved in our court process about something that happened or that transpired, I might set up a meeting with them and I might say, hey,
Yeah.
I just want to, circle back and talk about this. I was a little concerned about X, Y, and Z, and do that
Hmm.
offline,
Yeah.
out of the public, and certainly not yelling at a lawyer
Yeah.
in the courtroom or outside the courtroom.
Hmm.
And also, I don't want it to be a situation where especially when I'm dealing with someone who's represented by counsel, whether that be in a custody visitation case or a criminal case where the criminal defendant is represented by a defense attorney, and I'm berating the attorney in front of them. I mean, how does that make the defendant or the petitioner or the respondent feel in a situation like that? Like, oh, my attorney,
Picked the wrong attorney.
I picked the wrong one. And so you don't want to do that. So there's a way of handling those situations and circumstances. So,
Yeah.
but going back real quick, the story you told about the judge taking the prosecutor down the hallway, I saw, again, here I am on social media again, I saw a video where, the judge and the public defender got into it in
Oh
the
yeah, I seen
courtroom.
that one. Yeah. Yeah. He was like, well, meet me outside. I was like, and they really went outside to
They
fight.
went outside
Yeah.
and threw down. And then
Tell you something.
eventually the judge,
Nothing that happens in that courtroom is worth physical fight.
no, it is not.
It's not.
It really isn't,
It's not.
So, but we've talked about the robitis, whatever you want to call it. But on the flip side, man, talk about those instances in which, obviously you talked about it when we talked to, Judge Lee, but talk about those instances where you saw the judge in a situation that might have led to, some hard feelings or reacting a certain way, and they didn't. They comported themselves a certain way. So talk about that, because there's a flip side to this as well.
Oh yeah, and I think that is, I've said to folks after going through the judicial selection process and serving as a judge, one of the things I did before taking the bench was being a substitute judge, and I really think you should have to serve as a substitute judge before getting a full-time position. I think there's a lot of benefit to not only figuring out level of court and what you might be better suited at. I think a lot, because again, these jobs and these positions are completely different than what they look like when you walk
Sure.
into court. You just see the front facing part. You don't see the administrative part. You don't see the after hours. You don't see the work that goes in. But sitting as a substitute judge, just about close to 95, 100% of people that interview for judge at some point in their judicial selection interview is going to say, I believe I have the proper judicial temperament. Right.
Have you?
Everybody says that.
No, Sada. Have you ever heard? You know what? I don't think
You know,
I
I got
have the
questions about.
temperament. Yeah, I got questions about
That's
my
what I'm saying.
temperament.
Everyone says it.
Yeah,
Everyone says it. And
yeah.
I've seen enough judges where I know I've seen judges that have sat on their interview panel and they were appointed. And you appear before them and it's like, I remember this person sat across from us and said they had the proper judicial temperament. Either they were lying or they didn't really understand what judicial temperament meant. And I think that's one of those things where like when I think about that and comporting yourself the right way, am reminded of this time I was sitting in juvenile court and I don't really recall what the ruling was. I don't think it was a final custody determination. It might have been something procedural or whatever I ruled on. The mother in this case was not trying to hear it. And she's the only person that I can recall that I was like, oh, this lady might be coming in my direction. Like, okay, but she kept it verbal, but it was she was adamant in her displeasure and what she was feeling, and I mean going off on me. And it really is something, like you said, being a person, right? In a regular setting, if somebody's flying off the handle at you like that, in your personal life, not every scenario you're going to be like, okay, well, I'll just take it. Okay, ma'am, I understand. But in that position, that really is a part of the job. But I think having that experience of being able to sit, it's one thing to say you have judicial temperament. It's another thing to actually be able to display it when it's tested.
Sure.
And that's one of those things where, like, for me, I have to check myself, if I feel that we're getting to that point. And a lot of times it's seeing it in other people in the courtroom, right? Most often it's usually the attorney and a witness that is trying to be difficult,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah,
get the person that's like, well, sir, do you recognize the exhibits behind, plaintiff's exhibit number 2? And it's like their notebook is their bank statements. It says their name, their address, everything. And I don't know. I'd have to look at them to make sure. I don't know if these have been changed or not. It's like, really? Even I am like, come on. But the attorney and the litigant may be getting into it, but that's why I say for me, and I think amongst some of my colleagues, has been to develop the nickname of the Dante of just taking a recess in the middle of conflict.
yeah.
Like you said, we have similar temperaments. I'm not really one for all that fussing back and forth.
Yeah.
I don't think you get anything accomplished in that
You
either,
don't.
right? So it's very rare that you see two people having an argument and they are heated, and at the end of it, one of them says to the other, "You know what? You really convinced me, and I see it your way now." That's not how
No.
it's not how discussion is facilitated. That's not how agreements or consensuses are reached. And there's really no reason to do it in the courtroom. The other part of that is, being mindful that there's a record being made. So we have a new judge that just started last week. So today, I think, is her, 7th day on the
Okay.
job.
All
So,
right.
you remember when you first started, all those questions coming, and, I find myself, because somehow I am 5th in seniority in our court very
Okay.
quickly.
Okay.
We've had a lot of turnover. So like when with there being 15 of us when I first started, there were 14 other people I could ask a question to. And not to say that I don't ask questions to anyone that took the bench after me, but
Sure.
there are certain things where, from an experience standpoint, I would expect that, these judges that have been serving for 10 to 15 years maybe have been through that. But just speaking to our newest judge about some of that, I find myself kind of telling her some of these same things we're talking about, like, hey, you just wait until such and such does this in court and test you. Be ready for the fact that you're going to have to maybe take a recess or be able to control your courtroom, but do it in a dignified and respectful manner. I think what you mentioned about that judge from Jersey that wrote the book, so much of the robe disease comes from wanting the dignity and the respect that you feel that you should get because of the position. But we have to start with giving that same level of dignity and respect to the people that we interact with, not just in the courtroom, but the folks that work in the clerk's office, the people we have to interact with, the other stakeholders throughout the county for different programs or things that you're working on. We have to start with that. We may not always get it back, but I think there is an expectation on us to start with that. The judges I think that I admired the most and the ones I try to model did that on a consistent basis. Judge Lee, You can tell from sitting and talking to him, he was, he's not the type of guy that was going to belittle a litigant or an attorney in a public forum like that. Judge Newman in Arlington, Judge Dawkins in Alexandria, Judge Spencer when I was down in Richmond. There are various judges that you'll see that get it right, and they stand out because they get it right consistently. And those are the ones I think, at least for me, I try to model and emulate. Again, we don't bat 1,000. We don't bat 1,000, but even in the moments where I've had a time or two, first, especially when I first started, it was pre-COVID, where I came back to the bench, and as a part of the ruling, I mentioned, I'm sure that I exhibited some frustration. I want the parties to understand that this ruling is based on the case law and nothing about the interaction with counsel that happened on the record. I try to avoid those now because you just don't want to, have to go back out and be apologizing and things like that. But being aware of that is very, very important.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think about, you know, judges that I've been in front of. Shout out to my man who is a big fan of the podcast, B Sugg, Bryant Sugg, down in Newport News Circuit
That's
Court.
my guy. That's one of my favorite circuit court judges in the state. Judge
Yeah,
Suggs, that's my guy.
Judge Sugg is, I mean, his temperament, his
Yeah,
personality, laid back,
yeah,
loves his, commanders, and, and he has this laugh. And it's familial because
yeah,
if
yeah.
you know his nephew over at
Hmm.
Chesapeake, David Whitted, man, they very similar
Yeah,
temperaments.
yeah.
So he definitely is somebody that as a young lawyer, I would see him and like, oh wow, he's got a
Hmm.
great temperament on the bench. And I never ever felt like the robe got to him, as far as just the way that he treated the people that came before him. And another of our colleagues, one of your colleagues in the circuit court in Hampton, Mike Gayton. I've known Mike for we were prosecutors together, and just
Yeah.
and I tell people, and I told people if I ever got in trouble and I needed to be represented, I would
Mike would
call
be the guy.
Mike would be the guy. I'd
Yeah.
call up Mike Gayton, because just really smart, really intelligent guy, but
Hmm.
just very thoughtful in his approach and very deliberate. And he's going to tell you why he's doing what he's doing. And again, you might not necessarily agree with it, but you are going to felt heard and respected
Hmm.
after you have been in his court. Okay, now again,
Yeah.
you might not go in the same door that you came in, or go out the same door
Yeah.
that you came
Yeah.
in, but if you are going out the other door, you're gonna know why, because he's gonna tell you,
Yeah.
and he's gonna do it
Yeah.
in a respectful
Yeah.
manner.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about that. One of my colleagues in also in Hampton, Judge Tanya Henderson Stiff. I can remember being an attorney in front of her, and she's just got the sweetest, calmest demeanor. But I remember there were some of my clients that even though she got that sweet demeanor, they still went in the back. But again, it's just how you choose to carry yourself, because it is a choice.
Yeah.
You get to make a decision about who you want to be
Hmm.
with that robe on.
Hmm.
And so if you choose to be someone who is gonna let that robe go to their head, well, people are gonna have a certain perception about you, and
Yeah.
you may not care. You may not care.
Yeah. We're not.
Now, it's a little bit different than back in the day now, because we got judicial evaluations now,
Man,
and
listen.
that keeps some judges in
I,
check.
and It really should. I was mentioning that to our newest judge today,
Mhm.
and I don't remember what context it came up, but oh, it was, in terms of options. Like when you look at the motion and you realize that it doesn't really have legal basis. I can have a
Sure.
full day hearing, but no matter what you present, you just don't have the legal basis. So it's not really an evidence thing. The question of whether or not to just cut the attorney off at the pass and dismiss it, or have the hearing. And we were talking about ways to kind of flesh that out before starting the hearing. And I, told her, I said, just be mindful of, we practiced in front of certain judges that would handle things a certain way. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, maybe I'm being like that. And I said, well, you might think that way, but trust me, when you get your first JPE evaluation and you read those anonymous comments, oh, it has an impact on you. Like,
Yeah.
oh, really? This is, what did was it Drake or Meek Mill talking about Twitter fingers, JPE fingers? Can be sharp sometimes.
Yeah.
Can be sharp.
Yeah.
But what they're designed for and what they should be is a barometer and a check that, okay, maybe these are things I need to pay attention to. This is how I'm coming off in court. These are the concerns or the issues.
Hmm.
And not from a standpoint that it should make you fearful, but just make you mindful of, the way you administer justice in your courtroom or the courtroom that you sit in, because it's not even our courtroom when you get down to the end of it. But
Yeah.
those JPE evaluations, yeah, yeah,
They can play a role. They
they
absolutely.
de- they definitely do. They definitely do.
Yeah.
And we have every other year you go through them and you have your evaluator judge come and just talking to my evaluator judge about her experience traveling the state and sitting down with other judges and how the comments are received by certain people. And across the board, a lot of times what it is the folks that are pleased with the judge's performance may not even fill out the JPE because they think, oh, wait, that judge is good, so I don't need to fill it out. They fill out the ones that they have for the judge they might have a problem with. It's
Yeah.
like, even though it's anonymous, I know I've had a couple where it's like, I know exactly what case this is from, and I understand you disagree, and I appreciate your feedback,
Yeah.
and try to do better.
Yeah. So, talk to me about how you stay tethered. How do you guard against, getting to a place where you
Yeah.
allow the robe to get
Yeah.
to you?
I think I mentioned it before, and it's something that, my therapist told me some years back when I kind of first started in this is legitimately derobing. And it's the physical act of taking off the robe, but also when you get home, taking off the shirt, the tie, and changing. And it's the physical act of leaving the job behind for the day, if you can. Now there are certain times, like tonight, we're recording this episode. I still got work to do after this. Right? So I haven't been able to fully derobe today, but as best as possible, separating your home life from the work life, putting yourself in circumstances where it's not all about being a judge. Some of the other outlets that we have, like we've mentioned before, the podcasting has been a great outlet. Even though we're talking about the job,
Hmm.
it's completely in a different fashion. I love my DJing, that, especially being able to DJ an event where people don't really know what my day job is. And it's just like, I'm just a DJ. And I've had the experience where in a couple of events, I can tell as the word kind of spreads through the room. you know,
Hmm.
the DJ is a judge, right?
A judge? What? What kind of judge?
They told me you can't be a judge, right? Yeah. The other things outside of it. So, DJing, the going to the gym has been great in terms of staying grounded, having that kind of community built around working out, and it doesn't really matter. I had the experience this past Saturday for the first time after a Saturday class. About 9 or 10 folks from the gym went to breakfast, and I was blown away at the things that the other folks in this gym do for their day jobs. I mean, high profile positions, security clearances, half of them couldn't tell us what they even do.
Hmm.
But you would
You ain't
never
had no
know because
Tommies in the
we,
group, did you?
No, everybody has verifiable employment. Um, but we come together for something completely outside of what we do to earn income. We come together to work out and try to be healthy and support each other through that experience. So being able to put yourself in rooms where it's not all about the robe. I had a long period of time in that gym where no one knew what I did, right? And being able to be in circumstances and settings where it's not all about that, I think are necessary. Perhaps for others, maybe 24/7 being judged might be the thing. But for me, I need that separation of job and life, if you will. That's why I like to go make sure I go to my concerts, my sporting events. I got tickets to Wu Tang. I got tickets to the Cash Money No Limit tour. But getting out and doing the things that you enjoy doing because we certainly work hard enough in these roles while we're there. But there's nothing wrong with taking your vacation time, just like Judge Lee talked about. You can drive yourself into the ground and they'll assign those cases to somebody else and just keep moving on. So you have to have those outlets. One of my biggest outlets now is just embracing the role of soccer dad. It's so cool, especially with the World Cup now. Man,
Oh
I am
man,
a soccer
yeah.
mark. This is the first night since the World Cup started where there are no games tonight. And I know that because I watched just about every game I could watch. And I was watching the Canadian League Championship tonight. And even my son was like, "You do realize that's like third tier Canada soccer. You can tell from the crowd that it's not that great." I was like, "Yeah, but it's still a competitive soccer game." Like I'm so wrapped up in it. But having those outside endeavors and things like that, I think are crucial to making sure that you don't let the job go to your head.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm not watching arena football.
What's wrong with arena football? Arena football is very exciting. I had a cousin that played arena football. Have you ever been to an arena football game
I
live?
have not. I have not.
So, my cousin Scorpio, my
Yeah,
famous
yeah, of
cousin
course.
Scorpio
Yeah, yeah,
Brown,
yeah, yeah.
he played arena football for a number of teams, but he played for a team in Baltimore. And we used to go to the games, man. You talk about action packed and like dudes flying over the rail, and sometimes the
Yeah,
ball comes into the stand and the players too. Man, yeah, check it out.
yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Well, I think the point that I'm trying to make
It beats a
is,
Michigan football game. I'd watch arena football over Michigan.
of course. So why wouldn't you? But no, you're right. You got to figure out things outside that will lend themselves. So if that's you know being the husband, and being dad and you know podcasts, working out. It's all these different things that are a part of you that are important, to your life, that have a special significance. And so, we just have to always just be mindful that, again, the robe is not who we are, and we are not the robe. And we have to be willing, like you said, to derobe and to take that thing off, both literally and figuratively as well. Because the last thing you want to do is, still be wearing the robe around mentally, and it have an impact on how you interact with people. Now, I think it's also been said that it is true that while you may take off the robe, you don't really take off the robe. And you still, again, you have to treat people with respect, dignity. You hear stories about judges, you know, getting caught up in situations, outside of work. I hate to see the videos. Do you know who I am? You
Yeah,
know,
that's the worst thing.
uh, I saw a video of a judge. Um, you know, not only did the judge threaten to call the chief of police of whatever town that they were in. They did call the chief and talk to, them like, they pulled me over. How dare they? Blah, blah, blah. Like, come on now. First of all, from a judicial ethics,
Yeah.
standpoint, you know, the one thing that they tell you very early on is you cannot use your position to gain any type of favoritism,
Yeah.
especially when dealing with law enforcement.
Yeah.
Especially dealing with law enforcement.
Don't even mention it.
Yeah, I had a buddy of mine that I haven't gotten pulled over as a judge, but
No comment.
yeah. But I've got a buddy of mine that that is not on this podcast that has, and he just took down. There was no mention of, and that's how it's supposed to be.
That's the way it should be.
That's the way it should
It's
be.
It's a regular traffic stop. It has nothing to do with it. You mentioned something about treating people with respect even outside of a court, because you really don't know who you'll run into. And especially, in a place like Northern Virginia, there are people everywhere, but you were reminded how small the world and the community is. And I had this experience when I was a substitute judge. I'm coming in through, regular entrance like everybody else. And I don't remember what happened in the security line, but this lady, something goes wrong. I can't remember what I said to her, what she said to me, what the issue was, but there was a disagreement, I'll say. But when I tell you she went off, I mean, cussing, all kinds of stuff. And whatever it was, I was like, yeah, you wildin', because this is not that serious, right? But I'm also like, full suit going in to sub that day. So, we have the little back and forth. I'm subbing in JDR that day, and it's one of those days where you have like multiple cases. It's probably like a status docket. So I have quite a few cases on the docket. Hour or so passes, cases are coming through, and look who comes through the door.
Wow.
It's my friend from the front, right?
Wow.
And if I had the ability to have the camera show her face when she looked up, and it was me wearing the robe. And there was something that came, because I don't say a word about it, and there was something that came up. I don't know what the prosecutor said or defense counsel said something about it. And I was like, oh, I know Miss Taylor was here earlier. We had an interaction in the security line. But you just never know. And as a judge, you may run into somebody that in the community. And, I've had that experience as somebody that was a guy that used to like panhandle, that cussed me out at a red light one day because I didn't, give him any money. And sure enough, the door opens one day and it's him coming out of back and lockup. And I was like, you know what? I got to recuse myself because we've had interaction in the community. Yeah. I didn't do anything wrong. That man cussed me out. He cussed me smooth. I've never been so glad for a light to turn green in my life. But I was like, you know what? I obviously ethically can't deal with his case, but you just never know who you're going to run into, whether you're in the courtroom or outside of the courtroom. You gotta be mindful of it.
You hear with the Dave Chappelle, darkness, the tables have turned.
Man, nope, I wanted no parts of it. I kept it short. I said, we have interaction in the community. We'll make it inappropriate for me to hear his case. We're going to send it down the hallway. And
well, that's the right thing to do, in a situation like that. But yeah, no, I mean, you gotta take the robe off. You gotta figure out what are the things that they're going to, keep you in the right mindset, in the right mind frame, if you will. Yeah. So, all right. So, we're gonna close out today's show. Go back to Old Faithful, our off the record segment. It's been a while since we've done the off the record segment, but this is going to be a Would You Rather themed. So Judge Bugg, get ready.
I just wanted the record to reflect that I do not know what you're about to ask me.
No, you do not. This is definitely unscripted.
Oh boy.
Okay, here we go. So first one. Would you rather have every ruling you make questioned by Twitter, or have every ruling narrated live by a sports commentator?
I got to go with the sports commentator.
Okay.
If you're just narrating, you're talking about it, but Twitter, yeah, can be a rough place sometimes for a judge.
Yes, it can be.
Yeah,
Yes,
Twitter.
it can be. So I'm with you on that. I'm going with the sports commentator as well. So
Yeah.
all right. Um, here's a good one. Would you rather accidentally fall asleep on the bench for 5 seconds, or or call an attorney by the wrong name?
Goodness,
And
that's tough.
that would be all
Well,
day. And that would be all day.
all day or not
Yeah.
just
No,
once?
not just once. Numerous, repeatedly.
Yeah, it's probably that's a tough one because you don't want to fall asleep, right? It just you don't want to fall asleep on a bench, but you don't want to call somebody by the wrong name. Although I did have an attorney, I thought it was a hyphenated last name, and it turned at some point she corrected me and just said that was her middle name. So it was like me calling her Lamont Bug for the whole thing.
Miss Lamont Bug.
Um, yeah, Miss Lamont Bug. She was like, it's actually that's my middle name. I'm like, "Oh, okay." Um, yeah, I could just that's I don't know why that's so tough. I don't want to say I would rather fall asleep on the bench. I
It's
think I
just five
have to.
seconds. It's just 5 seconds.
I've seen plenty of judges fall asleep for longer
Yeah,
than that. I
yeah,
just don't want to be in that number,
yeah.
which is why I'm always, drinking coffee. I got to go with calling the attorney by the wrong name, and
Okay,
I'd have to apologize afterwards.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. The last thing that you want the judge doing is you're in the middle of argument or you're in the middle of your case and the
Yeah.
judge is falling asleep. There was a judge that again, I'm not gonna say whether they're still practicing it or still on the bench or not, but there was a judge that I know I practiced in front of when I was an attorney. I can remember the judge turning around in their chair like they were in
Oh yeah,
thought.
facing yes,
I'm like,
and
hold on,
knocked out sleep. Yes,
how you how
yes,
you how you gonna face the wall?
and I bet you we are not even talking about the same judicial entity,
No,
but
you are.
I've been in court for that too. Yeah, yeah.
Oh man, yeah. So all right, let's see here. Okay, would you rather mediate a custody dispute between two toddlers over a toy or two adults over a Netflix password?
I think the toddler's over the toy. And it's funny you mentioned the Netflix password. I had the experience of one of the wildest mediations I was ever involved in.
Okay.
Went late into the night, and ultimately we got it resolved. But I mean, we went late into the night over frequent flyer miles, and it was just like I don't know what to tell you. Like I earned those miles, and it's not fair. It's like it's just frequent flyer miles, but. Yeah, the toddlers at some point, maybe one of them will, come to their senses.
Yeah, you would hope. You would hope that would be the case, but that might not always be the case. Okay, all
Yeah,
right. So,
and Netflix though, and with the price of Netflix
oh my
keep going
gosh,
up
yeah,
too.
yeah, yep. All right, so all right, we got two more. All right. Would you rather only eat pregame tailgate food for a month or never eat tailgate food again?
Love me a good tailgate. But the problem is saying that I would eat it for a month because I know what that would do. I'd rather give it up.
Okay.
I'd rather give it up than eat it for a month because tailgate food for a month, oh my gosh, yeah, I can't go back to that. My stomach can't handle it. All the weight I put on, I'd have to give it up. I'd give it up.
So I'm
I'd be
just
at the tailgate. I'd be at the tailgate with baby carrots and hummus, having a great time.
see, knowing myself, I'm eating the food for the month, and I'm just gonna take the L,
Work it off.
and I'm gonna work it out.
I'll be back next month, baby.
I'll be back, but until then,
Until I'll be
because
back
you
in the
gotta
gym
think about what
sweating
you're
bacon.
giving up. You know what you're giving up for the tailgate. I mean, you probably giving up wings. I mean, you giving up. I mean,
I'm not huge on wings though.
Okay. Well,
I get it, but I just, yeah. As long as it's not a dry tailgate,
what
we'll
if
survive.
I mean, what if they got crabs at the tailgate?
I see. I don't count crabs as the tailgate food.
But
Though.
I'm saying
I'm
somebody.
not giving up crabs. That's
I
not
mean,
a tailgate. That's not a
you're
tailgate
Maryland.
food.
You're a Maryland Terrapin. Y'all do crabs in Maryland.
I don't know if I've ever seen anybody tailgate with crabs, even in
Okay.
College Park.
All
I
right.
might bring that to College Park this year, though. Now that you've said
Now that I
something,
mentioned it.
crabs are high in protein, low fat, man. Good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. All right. So, all right. Last one. Would you rather have a gavel that actually works like a magic wand or a robe that changes color based on your mood?
I need the magic wand. You don't need. I don't need the color change at all. Magic wand would be fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think I want folks knowing the actual mood that I'm in.
Yeah,
So yeah, give me the magic wand and
yeah,
we're gonna work these cases out.
yeah. Magic wand. We're gonna speed this docket along.
Yeah. So all right, Bug, anything else? You got anything else?
Man, as usual, it's always a pleasure to get a chance to reconnect with you on the podcast, get another episode under our belt, man, and keep moving this thing forward. You know, we started off camera talking about some of the guests we got lined up. I'm proud of where we're going with this thing, man. I'm really proud of where
Man,
we're going. Some of the stuff we got lined up and stuff we're trying to get lined up, I think it's gonna be really enjoyable, man. Really
Yeah,
enjoyable.
no, it is. I'm looking forward to the upcoming guests that we've got. We got some heavy hitters, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
are going
yeah.
to be gracing us with their presence over the next couple of months. So I'm excited about it, and yeah, and hey, drop it in the comments. You know, is there somebody y'all want to see? You know, if there's
Oh
somebody y'all
yeah,
want to see, let us know.
yeah.
And you know, we might just go in that direction. We'll have to see. You know,
We'll see.
yeah,
It's the only request we take.
yeah, exactly. All right, well, look, I ain't got nothing else, but if you ain't got nothing else,
Nothing else, man. Always a pleasure. Y'all be safe out there and check us out next time.
all right, peace.